Joining us now, Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason, Washington Post White House reporter Yasmin Abutabl, and Democratic strategist Adam Jentleson, former top advisor to Senators Fetterman and the late Nevada Senator Harry Reid. So, Jeff, the Biden campaign may have pulled down their ads at the assassination attempt, but on the use of violent rhetoric, the president is pointing the finger right back at Donald Trump, saying that's the context, that what he has said doesn't begin to compare to what Donald Trump has said in the past.
I think that's exactly right, Andrea. He said last night, essentially, stop asking me if I'm going to drop out of the race. Certainly don't accuse me of creating a negative political environment when you should be looking at the type of rhetoric that's been coming out of former President Trump's mouth for a long, long time. And I think you saw a definite sense of frustration from President Biden and a list of examples. He talked about the attack on January 6th. He talked about former President Trump seemingly making fun of Paul Pelosi after he was attacked. He wanted to press his case that this is an issue certainly not related to his one comment about a bullseye, but much more broadly about rhetoric that is coming from the other side.
Katie?
Yasmin, on the subject of whether President Biden should drop out, there is still a lot of chatter behind the scenes. Privately, Democratic lawmakers are still nervous about him. Donors are still nervous about him. I speak to a lot of voters, and they say they're nervous about him. But President Biden is adamant that he is not going to step aside. Let's listen to that moment from the interview with Lester.
Do you feel like you've weathered the storm on this issue of whether you should be on the ticket or not?
Look, 14 million people voted for me to be the nominee in the Democratic Party. Okay? I listen to them. I've been doing this a long time. The idea that I'm the old guy, I am. I'm old. But I'm only 3 years older than Trump, number one. And number two, my mental acuity's been pretty damn good. I've gotten more done than any president has in a long, long time, in 3.5 years.
And Yasmin, this hasn't been confirmed by NBC News, but two people are telling the New York Times that Congressman Adam Schiff, who's running for Senate out in California, told donors at a private meeting on Saturday that Democrats will lose the Senate and the chance to take the House back if President Biden doesn't drop out of the race. Are you expecting there to be another batch of Democrats who come out publicly to say that he should step aside?
I think there will still be a push by some Democrats to try to convince the president to step aside or to make their concerns very publicly known. We know from reporting that's emerged today that the DNC seems to be moving ahead with a plan to try to wrap up the official nomination of President Biden as a Democratic nominee. And that seems to have set off a lot of Democrats who are still very uneasy about his path to the presidency. And I think one of the other things that's making Democrats extremely nervous is, Adam Schiff's comments would be a big one, but also even the campaign has polling showing that the president is down in key battleground states. And the Biden campaign's argument since the debate has been that polling hasn't changed substantially since the debate. It didn't seem to have the effect, and Democrats are overreacting. But I think the problem is polls showed the president losing even before the debate. And part of their thinking and scheduling the debate so early was to try to change the dynamics of a pretty stagnant race. And it seems to have had the opposite effect. Maybe we haven't seen dramatic polling shifts in the public polling that we've seen that some Democrats feared, but it definitely didn't re-energize the president's campaign or really change the dynamics against former President Trump. And so I think there will still be another push by Democrats to try to get the president to step aside, whether for Vice President Harris or another nominee. But as far as we can tell, in the interview last night with Lester Holt and all his other public comments, the president seems extremely dug in. So I think there will be a push, but it remains to be seen whether the president is even open to these arguments at this point.
He's drawn the line, and the line is that he's got to be told that he has no path to the presidency, Andrea.
No, exactly that. And Adam, in terms of sources, at least one source has told me there'll be another attempt this week, as early as today or tomorrow, to try to dissuade the president from running by some party leaders, but that they know that time is running out. And actually, the official nomination before the convention is expected next week. Adam?
That's right. I think, what I'm hearing is that the matter is still very much unresolved in the minds of many senators and members of Congress. I think that you've still seen a lot of folks who have not stated on the record what they think on this. I think people are still examining the data. They are weighing their deep loyalty to President Biden and their deep love and appreciation for him and all that he's accomplished. But they're also looking at the fact that holding the Senate is extremely important. Holding the House or taking back the majority in the House is extremely important. And ultimately, the question is, what is the right thing for the Democratic Party as a whole? And I think that matter is still very much under consideration.
And Adam, Chuck Schumer followed up on Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries went last Thursday night after that news conference, a late Thursday night after the president had done the news conference, the whole NATO summit, and gave him some very blunt advice. Then Chuck Schumer followed up going to Rehoboth and secretly seeing the president last weekend. That meeting getting overshadowed, of course, by the terrible assassination attempt at 6 o'clock-ish, around that time, the Saturday night. But that was critical, reflecting the senator's view. And that must have been a tough, these relationships. That must have been really tough for Schumer, so close to, Joe Biden from the Senate. And now the president's out in Nevada, running from behind, according to Nevadans, and you spent so much time there when you worked for Harry Reid.
That's right. And, Nevada is a state that looks a lot like the rest of the country. It is extremely diverse. It's also got big rural populations. And I think some of the dynamics at play in the country at large are at play in Nevada right now. You're seeing very strong strength for the former President Trump with white working class voters in rural areas, and you're also potentially seeing some signs of slippage among non-white voters, as you see in many sets of data nationally. But I will always say Nevada is always close. Nevada Democrats run a machine like nobody else, and there's nobody I have more faith in to pull this out than the team out there in Nevada. So we will see, but it will definitely be close, and it will definitely be down to the wire one way or another.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.